This happened earlier last year, and it still messes me up if I think about it too much. First, a little backstory to explain. I'm a delivery driver for Uber Eats, and I've been doing it as a side gig for the past year or so to earn some extra money. Also, I'm a girl. Anyway, Uber Eats is a super chill job, although the pay definitely is not ideal, especially at night. Normally, any pings I get after 10 p.m. are just shitty fast food orders to customers where the chances of being tipped are even lower than they already are, which is low. I would say 2 out of 10 people tip, but whatever. Anyway, late night deliveries are rarely profitable, which is why I barely do them. However, on this night last year, there was a bonus going on. Reach 15 deliveries in a certain time frame and get an extra $75. Music to my ears. When that's the case, late night deliveries rock because there's no traffic and it doesn't matter where you're picking it up from. McDonald's, schMcDonald's. Bring on the bonuses. The faster you can get them done, the faster you can go home and knock out. Open roads all the way. Works for me. I was on a roll and finished my last Mickey D's run at 2:30 in the morning, cashed my bonus, and called it a night. For context, this took place in downtown San Diego. Downtown SD has fun restaurants, clubs at the core, but as you branch out, it gets more seedy. Once you get past 16th Street, it really gets sketchy. Lots of homeless camps, the works. I actively try to avoid this area, but in order to get back home on the freeway, I had to pass through that neighborhood. One more piece of info. I drive a 2002 shitty Ford Focus, and nothing's automatic. In order to roll the window up or down, you have to reach over and crank the lever. Because it's a hassle to roll them up and down manually each time, when I do deliveries, I usually just keep both my windows down, because it's easier to pick up delivery through the windows. This night, fuck me. I had my windows down as usual. I was planning to roll them up before I passed 16th Street where the homeless camp was, but I didn't get that far. As I turned down the street heading towards the main drag, up ahead I see a man with one of those reflective construction vests standing on the side of the road. There's always some sort of construction going on downtown. It's pretty common for it to happen at night, so I didn't really pay much attention. As I get closer though, the man runs in the middle of the street, waving his arms, signaling stop. I slow down, thinking he's going to direct traffic, or reroute me, or something. I brake to 10 miles per hour, then 5, leaving distance, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. He breaks out into a jog towards my car and stops directly in front of it, blocking me and my car from moving forward. Fuck. Immediate unease. This is weird. I'm wishing my windows were rolled up. It's 3 a.m. on a dark street and there's not a soul around except me and this dude. People talk about fight or flight, and I've always wondered how I would react in a situation that warranted a similar response. Now I know. My reaction was to freeze. Because I was slowing down, it hit me 5 seconds later than it should have. This guy is not a construction worker. He has on a hard hat and a vest, and the creepiest smile I've ever seen in my life. At first I thought he was just smiling to be friendly, but smiling to acknowledge someone longer than a few seconds is super unnerving. Try it right now. Count to 5 seconds in your head while grinning, and you'll see what I mean. That's what this guy was doing. Now he's just in front of me, and I can tell he's homeless. That or just, I don't know. Older guy. I would guess 60s, but homeless has a way of making everyone look old, so who really knows? He's just staring at me, wild-eyed and smiling, all teeth. His smile and mannerisms, the best way I can describe is Twisty from American Horror Story. Literally though, this guy looked insane. I obviously should have reversed, but my brain was panicking, and I didn't think that fast. I'm frozen in my car thinking, this is how I die. The whole time, he's not saying anything, just leering. Then like a ninja, he jumps onto the hood of my car and slams his fist against my hood. I am frozen in terror, just watching this guy. He starts pounding on the hood of my car, crawling around on his hands and knees. Not saying anything, just crawling. and staring at me. That's the most terrifying part. He never broke eye contact once during all of this, and he never stopped grinning. The thought of my window being open made me want to throw up, but at the same time, breaking eye contact and moving to roll it up felt scarier. Like if I made any sudden moves or looked away, he would try to come inside the car. He never said a word. I think it would have been less scary if he had said something, but he didn't. Just pounded his fist on the car and stared. In all reality, the whole encounter probably only lasted 15 seconds, but it felt like days. I am freaking out, and before I can gain any sense of doing anything remotely intelligent, I see headlights in my rearview mirror coming up behind me from down the street. This man sees them too, and in that instant jumps off my car and breaks off into a run behind me, heading towards a new car. Jesus Christ. I floored and don't look back until I'm halfway home on the freeway, and at this point, it's all adrenaline. For a long time after that, I stopped delivering at night, and I sure as hell don't go down that section of downtown anymore. I take the longer route home. I don't drive with the windows down at night if it's an area that's even remotely run down. What I realize from this is how naive I can be to just automatically obey someone just because they have a uniform. Like, I didn't even question slowing down at first, even though the situation was sketchy as fuck. The opposite, actually. In my mind, I was comforted by the fact that someone trustworthy was on the road. Subconscious thoughts went like, oh, nice. A public servant doesn't want me to make a wrong turn. By the time I stopped, it would have already been too late if this guy wanted to attack me. I shuddered thinking about it. I calmed down eventually by reassuring myself that it was probably just a crazy dude on drugs who meant no harm, which hopefully was the case, and for my own peace of mind, I'm gonna believe that it is. But what got me is the fact that the guy was dressed as a road worker on a road and deliberately behaving at first in a way to lead me to believe he was one. Why else would he wear that getup? Why are you trying to pull over cars? Just to freak people out? I don't know the answer, and I'm glad I didn't find out what it was that he wanted from me. So yeah, construction man, wherever you are, let's not meet. This is my other let's not meet situation, which occurred when my son was 4 years old. This time, I am 100% sure my kid prevented something horrible from happening to me. It turned into an episode of Law & Order with a terrifying ending. By way of background, I live in Milwaukee, which has the honor of being the most racially segregated city in the country. It's a cool city overall, but we have a really shitty inner city with tons of poverty and violence and gang activity. At the time this happened, I was living in a sort of in-between area. Not the ghetto, but not a super nice area either. I was a 22-year-old single mom. I lived on the ground floor apartment on one of the main streets. I parked in the back alley behind the building. My front door faced the street, and I had a side door too, with a walkway running between my building and the next door. Anyway, I got home in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday with my kid. As we drove down the alley to get to my parking spot, I saw a guy with a hoodie sort of lurking around my parking spot. It was weird because it was warm outside, and he had his hood up, but there were a bunch of gangster wannabe kids in the neighborhood, so whatever. It was definitely an odd place to just be standing though. As I got close to the building and started pulling into my parking spot, he turned around and started walking towards the street past my side door. He definitely left because I arrived. I figured he was just smoking a blunt or something. I didn't think anything of it, and I got my son and some bags out of the car. I went the same way the guy had just taken, to my side door. I didn't see him at all. My son and I went inside, and I was in the process of putting my stuff down when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and immediately thought it was the guy. Being young and naive, I answered the front door. It was the same guy, still with his hoodie up. He immediately smiled at me, but not in a super friendly way, more of a leer. He looked like he was about 16, cornrows with a fake gold grill that was studded with little fake diamonds. I regretted opening the door, but here I was. Hi. He kept staring at me and said nothing. At this point, I saw another kid in a hoodie pacing behind him on the sidewalk and looking at us. I was quickly realizing that this was not a good situation. My son, who I momentarily forgot about, came up behind me. He did the shy kid thing, where he stood behind me and poked his head out from behind my butt to look at the guy. Hoodie dude looks at him for a good couple of seconds, and then back at me. Yo, is Danielle around? I don't know who that is. Maybe try the other door. I gestured to my neighbor's door to my left. You sure? Yeah, sorry. And he left, walking in the opposite direction of my neighbor's door. Hoodie dude number 2 followed him. I thought it was really weird that they didn't even try to check the next door for Danielle. I thought the whole thing was really weird. My boyfriend got to my apartment a few minutes later, and I was glad to see him. He had a really old Jeep that he always parked out front on the main street. When he went out to get something from his car shortly after he arrived, it was gone. Car theft was a pretty common thing in this neighborhood, but stealing it from the main street in broad daylight was pretty ballsy. So we called the cops, filed a report, the whole 9. I told the cop about the hoodie dudes, since it seemed like it could be important. I was able to give a good description of the guy who came to my door asking for Danielle. I had no idea if it was relevant, but the fact that the Jeep was stolen shortly after these guys were around seemed pretty relevant. That's where the story ended, till 2 days later. I got a call from a different cop with a downtown precinct. He told me that they had found the Jeep, and other than the ignition, it wasn't damaged. He asked me if I could come downtown to do a lineup and see if I could identify the people who had knocked on my door right before the Jeep was taken. That was weird. A lineup for a stolen car? But I agreed. He asked if I would come downtown in a couple of days. Also weird that they wouldn't want me to do it right away. But I was mostly focused on the fact that doing a lineup was pretty fucking cool. So I go downtown to the precinct a couple of days later. The way this went seemed sort of unorthodox, but it was what it was. 2 detectives took me into a dark room, while a woman in her 50s was sitting there with a young woman in a wheelchair. The young woman's lower leg was in a giant cast with this whole metal contraption surrounding it, with a dozen metal rods going into the cast itself. At this point, I had no idea what was happening. The detectives instructed us that we weren't to say anything during the lineup, except if I wanted the guys to turn around again or whatever, and we couldn't talk to each other at all. We ended up having to wait in the room for almost an hour, in the dark, awkwardly not speaking. They explained it was taking more time than anticipated to get the 12 guys from the jail over to the precinct. Finally, we got started. They did 2 lineups and gave us forms to mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There was a large window in front of us, and they explained that the guys couldn't see us. They turned the lights on in the room behind the window, and they brought the guys in individually. I couldn't identify anyone in the first lineup. I sort of felt bad, but I couldn't. The second lineup started, and I didn't recognize 1, 2, or 3. Number 4 came out, and I immediately recognized the dude who knocked on my door. He didn't have a stupid grill in anymore, but it was definitely the guy. After the second lineup was done, they brought the other 2 women into the hallway and told me to stay put. After a few minutes, they came back to get me. The detectives asked if I recognized anyone, and I told them I was sure about number 4 in the second lineup, but couldn't identify anyone in the first lineup. I had gathered by this point that hoodie dude number 2 had likely been in the first lineup, but I hadn't got a good look at him when he was pacing on the sidewalk. They had me sign 2 forms, one for each lineup, with a second form identifying number 4 as hoodie dude number 1. When I gave the forms back, the detectives told me that they could tell me what was actually going on now that the lineup was done. Good, because I was confused as fuck at this point. He explained that number 4 was indeed one of the guys they arrested with my boyfriend's Jeep. The guys had stolen the Jeep and driven to a nearby part of town in a quiet, lily-white neighborhood. I am also white, this is relevant. They came across a young couple unloading groceries from their car. The young woman with a leg contraption was the female half of that couple. They parked the stolen Jeep behind the couple, got out, and immediately shot them. They shot the woman in the leg and shot the young man in the dick. He was still in the hospital in bad condition, which is why he wasn't there. The older woman was the girl's mom and had brought her from the hospital to do the lineup. The reason why it was delayed a couple of days was because she had emergency surgery to try to fix the damage to her leg. The guys didn't demand anything from the couple or take anything from them after the shooting. They just immediately shot them. The young woman managed to remember the license plate number of the Jeep, and they apprehended them in a corner store when a cop saw the stolen car parked outside shortly after the shooting. The shooters were both teenagers, but were being charged as adults. One of them stupidly talked before getting a lawyer and had told the detective it was a gang initiation. They had to shoot a white person. That was the price of admission. They had stolen my boyfriend's car after taking the bus out to the street I lived on. They figured it would be easier to get away if they had wheels. The detectives were pretty sure I had been the original target of opportunity, but couldn't explain why they hadn't gone through with it. Nerves, maybe? I knew why. It was because they saw my kid peeking out from behind me. They told me I might have to testify if the case went to court. A couple months later, one of the detectives called me and told me that the hoodie dudes pled out to attempted murder charges. The guy who got shot in the dick survived. I didn't ask how many years, but I assume that they're probably still in prison 13 years later. As ironic postscript to a story, my boyfriend had the same Jeep stolen from the same spot in front of my apartment about 4 months later, also in broad daylight. This time they didn't find it right away. He was staying over at my house weeks later when he got a call around 2 a.m. from the MPD arson unit. They torched it and left it in the middle of the street of a notorious violent area of the city. I moved after that. This memory of mine begins about 3 years ago. When I graduated high school, I had grown up with my grandparents, but decided to move to a different and much larger city to live with my dad for the first time in 12 years. I somewhat knew the city already because I spent summers with him, but this would be the first time I would have the freedom of an adult to come and go as I please, drive my car anywhere, smoke cigarettes whenever I wanted. I was excited, though sad to leave all my friends. As soon as I was settled in, my dad and stepmom sat me down to discuss a few rules and what I needed to know about the complex. Basic things like go wherever you want, but let us know when you leave, when you're coming back, even if it's 2 a.m. Oh, and you have to park in the street because the complex has limited parking. One more thing, there's a neighborhood creep. This guy, George, was well known to all the women in the complex, as well as the police that patrolled the area. He was tall, fairly huge, very intimidating looking. My parents were pretty certain they would leave me alone for one reason, my dad. Though George had a habit of stalking the other women in the complex. He would stop and find a new target if they had a man make a show of being in their place. A brother, a lover, or a father. It didn't matter what he was to the woman or what he looked like. George would back off immediately. Since I lived with my dad, who was also quite tall and rather big, intimidating, I also felt confident that I would be alright, and I was, for a time. It all started about 6 months after I moved in. My stepmom and dad were fighting a lot more until she got up and left him. One night, I was sitting on my porch having a cigarette and browsing Facebook or whatever. I wish I could say it felt like I was being watched, but I probably just looked up because I felt a bug or something. George was standing about 15 feet away, a little bit behind a tree, staring intensely at me. I nearly dropped my cigarette. Shakingly, I stomped it out and went inside. I was home alone, so I made sure to lock all the doors and then played a video game in my room. I told myself I was probably just paranoid. The next morning I got up for my morning cigarette and coffee. Lo and behold, 15 minutes after I got on the porch, George came out of his apartment to look my way. I sucked down my cigarette and went back inside. This pattern continued for weeks. It was like George stood at his sliding glass door peeking out, waiting to see when I would pop out. I told my dad about it, and he tried to sit with me whenever I went to smoke. If he came with me, George wouldn't even peep his head out the door. Of course, the other women in the complex have already tried to call the police about George, but he lives in the complex, and staring isn't a crime, so there isn't much they can do. I didn't know how far George had taken it with the other women before. With that info in mind, I knew calling wouldn't be much use. Things slowly escalated. Once my stepmom left, I had access to the parking spot. So I had 3 ways to get from my car to the apartment, depending on how I parked. One of the ways went just past George's apartment, about 3 feet from his door. Since I got off work late most nights, I avoided that route as much as possible. Slowly but surely, like he memorized my schedule, he would be on one of the paths when I was coming home. Not directly on the concrete, but a feet away on the grass, behind a tree. It was like he thought I couldn't see him. Picture a child hiding very terribly behind a tree. You could see 90% of their body, and you knew they were there. That's how he would do it. I would rush past him and avoid eye contact, but prepare to scream if I heard him coming after me. I started carrying my keys between my fingertips. I bought a pocket knife, and I would walk from my car with it halfway open already, even though I've never had any kind of fight in my life. Around this time, I believe my mom was trying to find me a free self-defense class, since I couldn't afford anything on my tight budget. My dad was steadily getting more and more pissed off as George edged closer and closer to escalating as the days went by. It went from November to May. If my dad wasn't home, I would lock my bedroom door and keep a knife under my pillow. I would Skype all night with my boyfriend, just so someone could call 911 for me if needed be. I put a bunch of flower pots in front of my bedroom window so no one could get in silently. I started sitting on the floor on my porch, below the wall, out of sight to smoke, but angled so I could see him if he walked up to it. Nightmares of being kidnapped or raped or murdered started to invade my sleep every night. Then, one day, my neighbor, Shell, was gossiping with me. "Did you hear about George?" "No." "He got arrested last night." In the complex parking lot, there's a big sort of electrical power box. It stands about waist height and perhaps 2 or 3 feet wide. About 10 minutes before I was supposed to come home and park right in front of it, some lady with her kid walked by and saw George sitting there on the box masturbating. Was he waiting there for me, jerking off, to the thought of me seeing him? The thought makes me want to puke and scares me all at the same time. I was relieved for a few days of my stress, but it was only a few days that he was gone. Then he came back, and he went right back to his old routine. One night he got far braver. It was maybe 7 p.m. when I went out for a cigarette with my dad. A neighbor walked up to chat with my dad, and George came outside and stood out in the open, staring me down. "Dude's asking to get his fucking ass kicked," my dad said under his breath. Then he chatted with a neighbor some more. I rolled my eyes and went inside and played some more video games. I was healing in a World of Warcraft dungeon when I heard Shell shouting, "Where are you?" But I was healing. A pretty important job, and I figured she was just talking to someone else, until she burst into my room in a panic, her eyes huge. She hopped from foot to foot frantically, like she was doing a potty dance. "He's bleeding!" "Who?" I asked in bewilderment. "Your dad! Come quick!" I made some teenage huffing sound and left my computer, certainly pissing off the rest of the group. I grabbed a little first aid kit filled with band-aids. I thought in my mind that my dad was doing something stupid, like tossing his pocket knife in the air and trying to catch it. But when I stepped outside, I found myself face to face with a real horror. About 6 people surrounded my dad, including Shell, and my neighbor Caleb held his shirt to my dad's side. He was facing away from me, and his entire back was covered with blood. It looked like he had been mauled by a bear. This was seriously my first thought. Caleb's hold on the shirt slipped, and blood sprayed. I feel queasy writing this down. I have never in my life been the person people turn to in an emergency. Blood makes me lightheaded, and I have anxiety attacks over not being able to find a specific bookmark. But all the adults around me were panicked aside from Caleb, and I needed to be the person that people could turn to. I threw the first aid kit onto the porch and told Shell where we kept the towels. She rushed inside to grab one. "Has anyone called 911? I shouted. 5 pairs of eyes turned to look at me like they never heard of 911 before. "No," my dad said. "I can't afford an ambulance." "Shut up," I said. "What happened?" "That fucker stabbed me." So I dialed 911 and relayed our address and the reason for the emergency. Operator told us to keep applying pressure to the wound on my father's lower back. My dad is a true champ. Even though the sidewalk was just one big puddle of blood, he stayed on his feet till someone thought to run and get him a chair. I ran back and forth along the walkway to get the police and show them the house that George lived in. And then I ran back and forth to get the paramedics. They were so cold and so agonizingly slow. They walked calm, and I wanted to scream at them to run. My dad is bleeding out. Don't you care? I learned later that it didn't run because it would let the adrenaline kick in and mistakes could happen. They shoved Caleb out of the way because he refused to let go of my dad's wound and then got him packed into the ambulance. I was about to jump on when the police stopped me and told me that I had to stay so I could give my statement. My dad shouted at me to call his boss, and I remembered all of his allergies and whatnot for the paramedics. God, 2 years later and all these details are burned into my brain. I gave my statement to the police. Then they made me sit outside the complex on the sidewalk for 2 to 3 hours. They kept updating me on my dad. Once I called his boss, my boss, and answered all my stepmom's messages, that's when I allowed myself to break down. It felt like I cried forever. One of the cops was nice enough to go into the house and grab my cigarettes and a bottle of water for me. He stayed with me the entire time to make sure I didn't run off or something, but he was very nice. He offered to let me sit in his cruiser a few times to get away from the cold. George was waiting in his apartment when they came. When they took him out to where I was, and there were 14 cop cars, he still kept trying to stare at me. I stared right back at him and felt so much hatred that I have never in my life felt. I wanted to go over there and murder him. My babysitting cop looked over and saw that George was staring, so he used his flashlight to keep George from being able to look at me. Once it was all over, I was allowed to go back in my house where I waited for information about my dad. I gathered the story from my neighbors while he was in the hospital for 9 days. He had shouted at George to leave his daughter alone, and George shouted back at him while I was in the house totally unaware. George said something along the lines of, "Come tell me that to my face like a man." So my dad hopped over the porch and waltzed up to him. The creep had been waiting with a 12-inch blade held to the side of his leg. He struck out with his empty hand and then got my dad in the back with a knife. It missed his kidney very, very narrowly, traveled up and punctured his lung and damaged his diaphragm. My dad didn't realize he had been stabbed at first. He got George in a headlock and pummeled the shit out of him, thinking the dude had just punched him in the kidney. George dropped the knife, rolled in the grass, and picked up another knife he had been hiding and stabbed my dad again. This time it was in his upper back. This wound was much more shallow, but still required stitches later. At this point, Shell came outside and screamed to my dad that he was bleeding. He took off his shirt, got pissed, and threw it at George. At that point, the neighborhood stalker put his hands up and went back into his apartment. The blood stayed on the pavement until noon the next day, when my neighbors kindly washed it off for me. My dad spent more time in the hospital in critical condition than George spent in jail. I feel like it was kind of my fault, and I've been addressing that in therapy. Throughout the week, while I was on the porch or just outside, I had so many women come up to me. They all told me to thank my dad what they did for them. They have all been terrorized by George at some point, and now they were certain that he would be away for good. Several poor women had George stalk them up to their apartment door and pull down his pants, demanding sex. I can't believe the cops couldn't do anything. One of these days, one of my neighbors came up to me to tell me that the police and neighbors searched the complex and found that George had stashed many knives all over the place, buried in the gardens, stuck behind trees, under his doormat. I shuddered to think of what he might have had planned to one day grab one of us and do something more sinister than stare. George was declared guilty for battery with a deadly weapon, but the attempted murder charge was dropped. He was out of prison by Christmas on good behavior or whatever, but my dad and I have a lifelong restraining order against him. He has never tried to come after me, so I can only hope that he's terrified of my dad. I wish I could tell you guys that I took self-defense classes and learned how to fight the way my dad can, but I'm still a pussy who can't even slap a spider, so there's that. My dad is doing all right now. He just had his third surgery on Tuesday, trying to repair the damage done to him internally. We're hoping that this will be his last, and his quality of life will vastly improve. I probably owe my life to my dad. If he hadn't fought George for me, maybe I would be the first victim George stabbed. George, let's not meet again. Hello, this is Bad Vibes. I got an update on this story from the author. It has been a couple years now. I'm 22. I've been looking to join the military. Unfortunately, we couldn't pay my father's hospital bills and his rent, and he was evicted sometime last year. I moved him up to our hometown where we have family and promised to help him out. I'm several $1,000s in debt from trying to pay his bills. A day before I moved him, he shattered his ankle when he stepped off the curb. Unable to work, we thought he would be okay with his family. They set up a tent in the backyard for him to sleep in, and after a couple months, kicked him off the property after his ankle healed. He's had 3 surgeries so far trying to repair his insides, but it seems like every time it just causes more issues. The last surgery was to repair 1 hernia, but the doctors just found at least 3. We are pretty demoralized, and he is tired of all the surgeries and never knowing if he'll ever be financially secure again. I am afraid I'm going to lose my father. Can't help him. I feel like a failure. Saved my life, and he gets this. Meanwhile, George is still a free man. When I was younger, I had gone into my bedroom alone to change into my PJs, and my mom said I'd come back and asked her why Peter Pan was at my window and if I could let him in. She of course ran to my bedroom, and sure enough, someone had pulled the screen off my window and had opened it slightly. Needless to say, we moved shortly after that. I was oblivious to what was wrong because, hey, I got to meet Peter Pan. TV shows and movies usually depict abductors driving white or black vans. I didn't realize this until I decided to buy a white 1994 Dodge cargo van to haul some of the gear I needed for work. While driving it, I've been pulled over by cops and searched 3 times for no reason, but that is another story. The point is, some people see vans as suspicious. One day, while returning home, a woman pushing a stroller stared at me for a long time while I drove along my home street. We have speed bumps and I have a lot of expensive, delicate gear in the van, so I was driving very slow. She stared at me, wide-eyed, the entire time, so I smiled at her like a friendly neighbor does. Staring so intently, she almost walked the stroller right off the edge of the curb. I thought it was funny and almost forgot about it. A week later, our HOA email threads heat up when a resident sends out a notice that his wife and toddler were being stalked by a man in a white van. Fearing a pitchfork and torch mob mistaking me for a creeper, I replied to all saying I live in the neighborhood and also drive a white van. I even provided my license plate number and home address. Big mistake. Jokingly, I added that I also witnessed a suspicious person in the neighborhood, a woman with a stroller who was staring at me so long and hard it made me uncomfortable. I provided a dated time of the incident to see if the alleged stalker was actually me. It was. Dude got triggered, started sending me email after email, CCing everyone on the list, telling me he can read between the lines of what I was saying. His accusations became more and more ludicrous and turned into personal attacks. The emails eventually stopped, but things got even weirder. On several occasions while walking my dog, a 10-ish-year-old girl would come out of her house, run over to me, awkwardly chat me up about my dog. I wondered why this child was talking to strangers, but thought maybe she just knew me from the neighborhood, so I politely played along. Then one day the girl shows up at my house. She said she was angry because her dad wouldn't let her have a dog like mine, so she wanted to visit my dog for a while. I told her I needed to talk to her parents before I could let her visit my home like this. She said okay and left, and I never saw her anymore. I have 2 daughters, and one of her friends told me that the girl who was chatting me up is the daughter of the triggered dude from the HOA email list. He had been sending her out to talk to me and take pictures. My daughter's friends was friends with his bait girl. Poor girl's dad is making his own daughter uncomfortable, which is why she confided in her friends. The dad was sending his daughter out to chat with me so he could accuse me of I do not know what. One detail I forgot to mention. I have dash cams in all my vehicles and a CCTV monitoring my front door. So the initial incident with the wife, as well as the girl coming to my door, was recorded. I emailed the triggered dude and kindly offered him copies of the videos for each incident. I also told him I was concerned that his daughter was behaving inappropriately towards strangers. Apparently this scuttled his plan. I never heard from him again. I'm currently starting to fear for my co-worker's life. Here's the story. My co-worker, I will call her Jane, is 33 years old, a virgin, and a very devout Christian. Her family is very strict and religious. I'm not bashing on religion in any way. I was raised a Christian myself. These people, though, they just seem to take their beliefs to the next extreme. Think of them as Flanders from The Simpsons. I mentioned Jane is a virgin because she honestly never had a boyfriend before. She's been on a few dating websites as of late, but she is usually very strict when it comes to the type of guys she would date. She can be kind of stuck up, which has gained her very little popularity. She recently meets a guy on OkCupid. Let's call him Miguel. Miguel claims to live in a bigger city than ours, an hour away. We live in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. And that he was 35 years old, also claims to be a virgin, and takes an interest in Jane. They chat for a while. She's very excited. Once they establish a fondness for each other, he claims he has $250,000 in savings and a job at Cessna that pays $65 an hour. He had a nice apartment and 2 cars, one of which being a '69 Dodge Charger. Sounds too good to be true, right? We all agree. Everyone but her. They agree to meet for the first date, and he says he'll drive down here to see her. While driving down here, he claims to get into an accident on the interstate and is left hospitalized. Jane is devastated. The rest of us, who she was telling this to, all assumed that he was just lying to her, and this was a way of getting out of the date, and her finding out that he was scum. We didn't think that there'd be any communication afterwards. We were wrong. They continued talking, and shortly after getting out of the hospital, he claimed to be hit by a car crossing the street. His life apparently took a turn for the worse, as he claimed he was laid off by Cessna. His apartment was burglarized, and all of his money and his other car was seized by the IRS due to a misunderstanding in his taxes from years back. Completely believable story, right? Jane decides she doesn't care about those things, and she's willing to continue talking to the man. He soon starts calling her daily and coming over once a week to visit her at work. At this point, we meet this guy, and he comes off as your typical loser with a beer belly who lays around the couch all day, yelling at his woman to bring him beer. Despite all the money he claims to have, he wears clothes that are way too big for him, usually sweatpants and flip-flops. This earned him the nickname Flip-Flops amongst us at work. He has problems making eye contact with people when he talks to them, and has the creepiest smile. We knew right away he doesn't seem very trustworthy. 3 weeks into their relationship, he shows up at our work and proposes to Jane. She gladly agrees. As we all shake our heads in disbelief, he tells us he got a new job working for Microsoft down in his city. We do the research. There is no Microsoft jobs over there, unless you're working and selling products at Best Buy. And he tells her he's now seeing a therapist for his anger and jealousy issues. Many red flags are going off in our heads at this point, but Jane doesn't seem to mind any of it. He moves down here to be with her after claiming his family disowned him for wanting to marry a Christian, and that's the reason why she'll never get to meet them. As if this isn't ridiculous or over the top enough, things start to get creepier from here. He tells us he got a new job for $25 an hour as the head engineer at Exide Manufacturing. The head of HR at Exide is actually a relative of a friend of ours, so we ask her about this. They never heard of this man, and the position he claims doesn't exist. We try to tell Jane about it, but she brushes off all of our comments and claims that we're just thinking too much about it, or we're just jealous. He starts picking her up and dropping her off at work every single day, as well as picking her up for lunches. She still believes he has a full-time job. He's only doing this because of how much he loves her. We start to feel like he's just wanting to know where she is at all times. He asked the maintenance man at her work after the first meeting to be the best man at their wedding. This doesn't strike Jane as odd, but apparently Miguel is untrusting enough for most people and has no friends of his own. Her parents loan him a spare van so he can use that to drive from now on. To our shock, her parents are already buying baby clothes and supplies for the couple. They are completely won over by this man. I think they're just blinded by the fact that their daughter finally found someone that would give them grandkids, which is a really sad thought. By this point, we notice her personality growing slightly more stressed and depressed as time goes on. Now, if you listened up to this point, you're probably thinking, oh, she's just another dumb girl who picked a sleazeball guy who's milking her for all she's worth. And you're definitely not wrong. We thought the same thing, until one day she dropped a little bomb on us. He recently told her they used to be special ops in the military, the Air Force to be exact, and they decided that they wanted him to work for them again. $75K for working 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. The story always changes. Something she doesn't find suspicious at all. Testing military equipment that's too dangerous that could be life-threatening. He agrees to the work, and we all think he's copping out of the relationship. She then tells us that if she wishes to remain in contact with him, they have to get married as soon as possible, and she would have to prepare to move away with him. She explains that the military has been calling her and making stops by the house to explain to her that she'll have to marry him immediately, and she has to be prepared to move to an undisclosed location at any given moment. From that location, she will not be allowed to make contact with friends or family, since all that's going on is top secret, and she has to prove that she can be trusted. Obviously, all of us are now alarmed. Everyone but her and her family. They are delighted that she's with a military man and are proud that she gets to be a part of something much bigger. The rest of us, sane people, are trying to figure out what on earth he could be plotting. Is she going to be hijacked into human trafficking? Is he going to murder her? One of our co-workers had just called the human trafficking hotline, and they think that this is something they definitely have seen before. Unfortunately, they can't do anything about it until he actually makes a move and takes her. We're looking into contacting our local police to see if there's anything that can be done about this before she gets the phone call that tells her that they have to make their move. This is all so crazy, we don't know what to expect or what danger she really is in. My boyfriend, who I live with, works as a teacher in a town about 15 minutes away by train. He gets home more or less at the same time every day, give or take an hour or so. I, on the other hand, work from home. In late January of this year, we'd gotten in a pretty big fight about something stupid. I can't even remember what it was about right now. But it was one of those fights where we didn't speak to each other, text, call, or anything the whole next day. So, this afternoon I was laying in bed getting work done. It was a Tuesday, and I was pretty sure his last class finished at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays, meaning he'd surely be home at 2:30. But around 1 p.m. I heard the front door open and shut. I thought, I guess he's home an hour early today. It was normal for him to skip his last class every once in a while, so I didn't really think anything of it. In fact, I was mostly mentally preparing for the awkward post-fight, "Hey, how's it going?" conversation. So I continued to lie in bed and do my work and wait for him to come in and change his clothes. The bedroom door was closed and I had earplugs sort of half in. I usually do that when I'm working, but I could hear the heavy footsteps of him walking around the apartment as he always does. If we hadn't been mid-fight and I wasn't so preoccupied with the awkwardness of it all, I might have noticed it was strange how slow the footsteps were, or how long he spent walking around the living room. But I was caught up in the dramatics of the fight and didn't want to think about it. I was just laying there, waiting for him to finally come in. Finally, the bedroom door slowly opened just a few inches. I turned my head towards the door and prepared to give him a sort of awkward, "We've been fighting for 24 hours, huh?" smile. But the door didn't open more than a few inches. I looked and saw that it was a woman's hand with red nail polish on the doorknob. Whoever was there slowly closed the door just as they had opened it, without entering the room. I jumped out of bed, ripped out my earplugs, and sort of froze there for a few seconds while thinking rapidly. My first thought, that was not my boyfriend. Then I thought, could it have been his mom, his sister, the landlord? For some reason I concluded that it surely was his mom or his sister. So I opened the bedroom door and walked into the living room. There wasn't anyone there. The room smelled heavily of woman's perfume. Then I came to my senses. His mom and sisters don't have keys and have never come over before. The landlady has never entered without permission. This was a stranger. I ran back into the bedroom and shut the door, now shaking heavily. There was a balcony connected to my bedroom, so despite the cold January rain, I stood on the balcony and called my boyfriend. He picked up and I asked him if his mom or sister might come over unannounced. He told me, "No, do not move. I'm calling the police." The police were there in minutes and searched the whole apartment. Of course, nobody was there at this point. It was weird though. Nothing was missing from our apartment, despite us keeping a jar full of money right in the entrance. Nothing was even touched. In fact, it seemed like the intruder came straight to the bedroom, saw my legs on the bed, panicked and left. Plus, you can't open the wooden front door without a key. For a few days now, my boyfriend and I were convinced it was just the landlady being nosy, and began to feel better. Nevertheless, we demanded the landlady change our locks. When she came to change them with her husband, she made a discovery. There was a square area by the keyhole that had been scratched away with something. The landlady said surely someone used tools to break into the apartment. Then, a day or two later, my boyfriend told me, "I have to tell you something, but don't freak out." He told me that the orange kitchen scissors were missing. I obviously freaked out. I tore through the whole apartment looking for those scissors. It's been 6 months and those scissors are gone. So the whole thing is just creepy and weird. A stranger breaks into a nice apartment but doesn't touch anything or take anything valuable, not even the money jar right in the entrance. Takes scissors from the kitchen, goes straight to my bedroom, sees someone in bed and immediately leaves. I never got to meet this person who opened my door that day, and I hope I never do. I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was recently dumped, so my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and a new cop, I had the "I'm invincible and I can take on anyone" mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted, and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at the stars and hang out, and we could meet up at our house. So that night came. I was excited and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then, the van started driving towards us and pulled up right in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight in the car and walked up. In the front of the driver's side of the van, there's a decently sized man. I asked him what was going on and if he could back his car up a little bit. He was very polite, said he was the owner of the property, and said he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's been having trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be shooting anything. I assured him that we only came here to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that. Told me I'd have a nice date and drove away. After that, the girl was texting nonstop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hit my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy. I immediately knew I was fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied. Obviously, he then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me they have a gun and to give them my money and truck and I won't get hurt. Of course, with my invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry saying they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told them I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and told them to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all this, they complied. I was able to call 911 and tell them my name and badge number. I had two at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could to this field. While on the phone, they both fled. Again, stupid new young cop mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw a muzzle flash. My invincible mentality went right out the window. I ran like hell towards my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had 2 officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both understanding and didn't give me shit about it at all. The most used words were dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped in their cars and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they were getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right in the center console and searched the car. What scared me most was when my field officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out and told me to come look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale and looked horrified. I went back to the van where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, and a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be dry blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turned out it wasn't blood. The plates had been stolen and the van was reported stolen. I still get shit about the whole encounter, but luckily no one got hurt. I would never use online dating again, ever. I was 12 and my older sister and I were home alone for the weekend. I was waiting for a friend to pick me up and getting restless. There was a knock on the door. Thinking it was her, I ran to answer without checking through the peephole. A man was standing there with a clipboard and said he needed to check our gas meter. In disappointment of my friend still not having arrived, so I told him, yeah, sure, whatever you need. I didn't even notice at the time he wasn't dressed like a city official. He had on a green and purple shirt with bold stripes like the host of Blue's Clues. He came in immediately and went upstairs to where our bedrooms were and walked into the open door of my room. The typical girly girl room with pink and glitter. Thank God. My sister came down the stairs at almost the exact moment. She said, "Oh, is that Daphne's dad? Why is he going upstairs?" And I complained about how Daphne wasn't here and was going on about how unreliable she was when my sister cut me off. "Wait, if Daphne isn't here, who is that?" I said, "He's here to read the gas meter." Her face turned white. She flung open the front door and dragged me out, hand clamped over my protesting mouth. She said, "Our gas meter's outside." Neither of us had cell phones. It was in the 60s. Then my ever-resourceful sister had a stroke of genius. A man was walking right by our house and she motioned him over. She called loudly into the house, "Oh, Dad! It's good you're home. A man from the city is here to read our gas meters upstairs." And just like she hoped, the man on the street said, "What are you talking about?" The man in the striped shirt bolted out of the house. The man on the street asked us repeatedly if we were okay, if we needed him to stay and wait in the yard with us until our parents came home. He was very sweet. We were so startled that we barely thanked him before slamming and locking our doors and windows. Irate as my sister was that I let someone in our house, she begged me not to call the authorities because my parents left her in charge and she worried she would be in trouble. I didn't want her to catch any heat from my carelessness allowing some guy in, so I was on the same page. 3 weeks later, a girl in our community went missing. Same MO. She was home alone and authorities found the door open and no signs of forced entry. My sister and I discussed our options, but deep down we knew we had no choice but to come clean. We told the police everything. I don't know if it ever helped, but they told us they had a reason to believe it was the same man. They also tracked down the man that helped us on the street. Turns out we already knew him. He worked at the butcher shop. We just didn't recognize him. He was lifelong friends with my family after that. Our parents were mortified. They weren't angry with us, just glad that we were okay. Though they did review all the rules of caution and didn't leave us home alone for a while. They found the girl and said she'd been held for a few days and then buried alive. They never caught the man, but fear not, he was in what appeared to be his early 30s in the 60s, so in any case, he has to be dead by now. I thank God every day for my sister's resourcefulness and quick action. False meter reader, let's not meet. My daughter reminded me of this today, and I thought y'all would enjoy a laugh. When my oldest daughter was a freshman in college, she and her friends decided to get into bones. Specifically, that they would pick up decaying roadkill, clean the skulls, and make art from them or sell them. Eventually, they decided to get some fresh cow skulls to clean. They went to local slaughterhouses and bought 3 cow heads, wrapping them in plastic garbage bags and putting them in the back of their car. On their way to the cleaning site, they stopped at a home improvement store in the middle of nowhere to pick up some supplies. 2 people went inside, 2 stayed with the car. After a few minutes, my daughter said, "I think those heads shifted. I'm going to go check them out and make sure they didn't come open." She got out, opened the hatchback, and the 2 bags toppled out, spilling blood and decapitated cow heads onto the pavement. As she jumped back, she happened to see a lone store employee pushing carts back to the store, and he saw the heads and the blood. He dropped the carts and power walked as fast as possible to get to the storefront, just as my daughter's friends came out. "We need to go," she said, and then they went, with no haste, and I'm sure that the poor traumatized employee is hoping to never meet them again. I was 13 years old at this time, on vacation with my parents in Turkey. We were in an all-inclusive hotel. The hotel was full of tourists from different countries. There was this one guy, around 20, who was staring at me for some time. I felt uncomfortable and asked him how he was doing. Wrong choice. The next few days, everywhere I was, he also suddenly appeared. Not flirting, just lurking for hours and watching me. He had a really strange vibe around him, and I felt I shouldn't be alone with him. Now, I was still young, so my parents didn't want to leave me alone in a foreign country, so he could not bother me. But one night there was entertainment in the hotel, which became boring to me after some time, so I told my parents I wanted to go to my hotel room and I would see them in the morning. I left and walked to the elevator. What I did not know was the guy who was watching me for days saw me leaving, and he had followed me. When I saw him also coming in, I was in great fear. He looked at me silently with a sinister smile. This is it, I thought. Rape, assault, or maybe even worse. And just as the doors of the elevator were closing, someone stuck their boot between it in order to prevent the doors from closing. And I'm not kidding at all. All I could see was a boot. The doors opened, and it was my dad. He saw that the creepy guy was leaving at the same exact time I had left, and didn't trust it. He looked the guy in the eye and said hello. My dad took me to my hotel room. To this day, I'm so glad for the rescue, because I don't know what would have happened if he didn't. Part of my previous job's requirements involved doing bi-weekly inspections on HUD properties, vacant government-owned homes that we were contracted to list for sale. A lot of these properties were in pretty unsafe neighborhoods. One particular remains my least favorite house out of over 300 to this day. To start with, on my first visit, it was apparent something had happened in the house. Somebody had been making meth, or something had gone horribly wrong. A fire had occurred, but there was no record of a fire with a previous insurance company. The neighbor said no fire had occurred, and the local fire department and police had never responded to a fire. I had a fair share of problems with broken windows, used condoms, the usual stuff you find in a neighborhood like this. Then, one afternoon, I pulled up in front of the house and started my inspection as I usually did, by walking around the house and going into the garage. Immediately, a car down the street started honking their horn. I thought it was weird, but this isn't the best neighborhood, so I just ignored it. This house had a garage that was built onto the back of the house, covering 2 bedroom windows. The windows looked down into the garage. There was no door from the garage into the house. In order to enter the garage, you had to go through the single door on the left-hand side of the property, towards the back. I should also mention that the heating system is such that the heat comes from the middle of the house through the big opening vent covered with a screen. The ductwork is gone, so when you look up through the vent, you can see into the crawl space. I go into the garage and notice the crawl space door is open. I look up and notice one of the bedroom windows is open. I stop. They should both be closed. I stand there for what feels like forever and contemplate calling the police, but I'm in a hurry, so I just turn around, go back out the door, and lock it. I go into the front of the house. The car down the street is still honking its horn. I start my inspection as I usually do. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom number 3, bedroom number 1, and then I go to open the hallway closet between bedroom 1 and 2. It won't open. I know I've opened it before. I'm turning the knob and pulling it, and it will not open. I start to get a really weird feeling in my stomach. The car outside is still honking. I step over the vent in the floor to go to bedroom number 2, and I look down to see a pair of eyes looking back up at me. I look up, wipe my face, look back down, and they're gone. I ran straight out of the front door, into my car, and locked my doors. The car had now stopped honking. This is what I think had happened. When I got to the house, there was 2 people inside. The person honking the car had warned them when I got out of my car. One of them had time to jump out of the window into the garage and then went into the crawl space. The other one only had time to get into the closet. When I ran out of the house, the horn stopped. They were signaling that I was leaving. I returned to the property 2 weeks later to find the windows shut. The crawl space door locked, but a broken window. I did not enter the house, but I called the police instead. They found the closet door shut again, and 4 officers were unable to open the door. Upon my return 2 weeks after that, the door opened with ease. I'm convinced that someone was in the house with me on many of my visits. I just didn't know it. For a bit of context, I grew up in the middle of a farmland in a large Victorian home. Given its story, there had always been several shacks and barns that once belonged to the builders of this house. There is a highway that sees maybe 3 cars on it during the night, and directly across, about 200 feet inwards of a cornfield, is a shack that I have always found creepy. As kids, myself and friends would dare each other to go inside and look, which always ended up as us going in as a team. Nothing scary was ever found. Maybe a few broken glasses, metal piles, and miscellaneous items. There was no electricity or any sort of utility that made it homely. Years go by and the existence of the shack becomes a part of my daily life. However, one particular night, I was watching TV. I had noticed a light going off and on outside my window. After getting startled, I dismissed it as passing cars, simply more frequent than they typically are. An hour passes. It's nearing midnight and the light stays on. This time I knew for sure it was coming from outside. My family was asleep, but being my pansy 16-year-old self, I needed confirmation. Too bad for me. Nobody wants to go check it out, so I go alone. I grab my pocket knife and a flashlight, the best thing I could think of with my shaken thoughts, and take off into the night. As I near the highway, the lights turn off, almost making me choke on air, but I had to figure out what the hell was going on. I make my way into the entrance of the shack, which has no door, and I slowly begin to enter, my flashlight scanning the room for any signs of life. What happened next, I'll never forget. 5 feet away from me, there was an old tattered recliner facing away that my father had tossed in there for future disposal. I shine my light on it because I knew I seen it rock ever so slightly. As I did that, a man stands up from the recliner, says absolutely nothing. All I could tell was that he was a middle-aged man and wearing a jacket of sorts. Before I could process what was happening, I was already sprinting across the road and praying he wasn't behind me. It felt like years before I made it to my door, but as I am about to make it in safely, I decide to look back. He was standing in the road completely still, no words whatsoever. It's been 7 years since. The shack still stands. The recliner remains in its place. My dad never believed me. I wish someone could share the dread I had when I realized the recliner was facing the window, which was directed straight at my house. A week or so before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill to pick up a jar of ragu for my mom. On the way home, a man I'd never seen before fell in step with me and began talking. "Hi," he said cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" I walked silently, not replying and hoping that he would take this as a sign that he should leave me alone. Subtitles were not his strong suit though, because he kept right on chattering. Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now. You'll be needing a different type of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay though. They can still bring you to me until then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair. I was just on my way to get more suckers for the candy jar in my office. Do you like suckers? Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward, up the steps and in through the kitchen door. I didn't know back then, but this was the beginning of a very long, very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to start showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who said maybe he was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. My dad called me into the living room and sat me down. He asked me about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home, and if I talked to him. He said I wasn't in trouble, but I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked me if I was sure, and if I was forgetting something. I told him no again, and he frowned, then asked, "Then how does he know your name?" I didn't know. Turned out that wasn't all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister or I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day, at first. Neither of us knew what he was saying. Then, one night, one of my brothers told us that he was telling my parents that he was going to hurt me, and later, my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad called the police, but as this was before there were stalking laws, there was not a lot they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his from back in the day, who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, life as I knew it came screeching to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone. I couldn't play outside. I couldn't walk to the Super America, sort of a 7-Eleven for those who don't know. When access to me was completely denied, things escalated. It was around this time he began threatening my sister as well. Then one afternoon, my sister, two of my brothers, my mom and I were in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. They'd seen him too. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was most certainly fake. A couple weeks later, we woke up to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a gorgeous saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were all devastated, but there was no evidence it was him, and it was ruled an accident, but none of us believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home and who wasn't. If my brother would say my dad was home, he would tell him who was really in the house. He would also talk about the house itself, about the window in the kitchen he could easily open with a knife from the outside, even when it was locked. About the French doors that were connected in the living room to the side porch, and how the lock could be finagled from the outside if you jiggled it right. That night, my dad put in some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event at my dad's work. My older brothers were at a St. West roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French door swung inwards, and in a few milliseconds before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see his silhouette. My sister whipped the phone at the television, and we ran up the stairs. About halfway up, we realized our little brother was still asleep on the living room floor. As quietly as we could, we stepped back downstairs to get him. We went into our bedrooms and did not turn on the lights. This way we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while, and when we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked loudly. "What do you want?" my sister asked out the window. He stepped back and said, "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed at him, declaring she was not stupid. She could see he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He then left. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what happened, and they walked around the yard, watching for him. They came back in, and things settled down. By now, we've pretty much given up calling the cops, because it never helped us, so we just went back in, each of us carrying a knife from the kitchen. Eventually, one of my brothers went back into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal for a snack. You know that sensation you get when you can just feel someone watching you? Yeah, he had that in spades. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway, into the dining room, at the window. He didn't see anything, but he could still feel eyes on him. So he went closer to the door to try to see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting off the windows of the doors, so he still couldn't see anything. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up against the door. Then he cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There on the other side of the window pane was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell to my older brother, and when he looked back, he was gone. They went outside again looking for him, but didn't see him. The next night, we were on the table playing Crazy Eights, and my brother was restless. My sister asked what's wrong, and he said he always felt like any minute now there would be a boom, boom, boom on the door or window. Almost immediately after he finished that sentence, boom, boom, boom on the window right behind him. In the chaos, the two eldest ran out, but he was already gone. A couple weeks later, I was at school, and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw a now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name, and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been informed all about him, and she took me inside right away and called my mom. That same day, my mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, and he called to say he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, I woke up one night thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink, and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. Dr. Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his children being terrorized. He was tired of being afraid every time he left for work or something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent me back up to bed. These events, and many more, took place over a period around 18 months. Then as suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from our lives. The phone calls, the drive-bys with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time during and after Dr. Ramsey days, I would have a reoccurring nightmare in which I would wake up to find him standing over me as I slept. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I found out years later that when he was calling, Dr. Ramsey would tell my parents that he was going to rape and kill me, and later my sister, and there was nothing they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if he was in a car wreck, locked in prison, in a coma, but sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in that darkened kitchen one night. I don't know. I'm not sure I want to. I was about 13 or 14, and I was babysitting 2 boys for some church members. I had done it before, and the kids loved me, and the parents were very comfortable with me. This was a night where they were going to be gone pretty much until like 2:30 in the morning. I was doing it for free that day, because they were going to do something church related, and that's just how I roll. Anyway, the house they lived in was an apartment complex. You know, one of those small ones that had 2 floors and 4 places in each spot. They're on the bottom floor, with 2 bedrooms on each side of the apartment, with the kitchen on the left and the living room on the right, with a sliding glass door to a small patio. It was about, I think, 1:30, and I knew they would be getting home soon. The kids were knocked out this time, and I finished my homework, but they didn't have cable. This was before Netflix became an online service, so they had a couple of DVDs and a VHS to watch, so I grabbed Lamb before time to make the night go quicker. I was already very tired and nodded off a couple of times. About 2 a.m., I hear a knocking on the front door. Knowing the parents had a key, I did nothing but sit there in the dark. Being a paranoid person and who watches and reads enough horror, I grabbed a baseball bat, which was next to the couch. And what happened next will haunt me. I heard a small voice, almost like a young woman's. "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart stopped, and I realized the patio door didn't have the blinds shut. My eyes shift slowly to the door, and I see someone on the patio staring in. I couldn't make out anything other than they were very short and wide. I screamed and ran into the kids' room. Thankfully, they were still asleep. Sadly, this was before I had a cell phone, and there was no cordless phones. All I did was push the dresser in front of the door and stared at the window in the room. That's when it became dark as a shadow loomed on the window. The knocking started again, and the woman's voice called out, "Come on, dearie. I won't hurt you. Please come out." The window was being knocked on so hard, I was afraid that it would break. The kids finally woke up and they were screaming and scared. I was a big girl, and I could at the time lift my own weight, but knowing I had 2 kids with me, I became vulnerable and afraid. Within 2 seconds, I hear the father yell out, "Hey, who the hell are you?" And the person ran off. The front door opened and there was harsh knocking on the kids' bedroom door. Thankfully, it was the parents. I let them in and put the dresser back. I explained what happened, and they called the police. When they arrived, they obviously found nothing, but the bushes that hid the patio were obviously cut up and ripped to get through. I babysat for them once more after that, but they moved away 5 months later, and I never babysat anyone again. And again to this day, I know the woman was long gone, but every time I hear her knock, a chill runs through me. Stranger who is watching me, let's not meet again. I don't even know where to start this story. I was kinda young at the time, around 7 or 8, but old enough to know what was going on. I lived in a pretty decent neighborhood, but my family was in the process of moving. There was a large mixture of families with children and retired seniors living on my street. There was a neighborhood babysitter who took care of my sister when she was too young to go to school. She also happened to babysit me on multiple occasions. She was always kinda rude, a pudgy lady with 2 annoying sons and a very weird husband. A lot of kids got taken care of by her, so my parents trust her to take care of us. Everything was somewhat normal, except for the fact that she was kind of rude to anybody that wasn't her kid. Her kids were pretty misbehaved. They were always fighting, hitting each other with plastic swords, and screaming at the top of their lungs. At one point, the younger toddlers had to take a nap, so she forced all of the other children to sit in the corner and be quiet, besides her kids. Odd behavior for a babysitter, but we never thought much of it. Another thing to mention is that she always took naps while babysitting, as in, she didn't pay attention to the kids, she just shooed them away and fell asleep. She was also notorious for giving her sons chocolate milk and telling the others they had to drink water. My sister and I tried to ignore it, but eventually we were kind of annoyed. My sister had a loud mouth, so she told my mom how she treats the kids she babysits versus her own children. I'd also like to acknowledge that my sister had just turned 4, so she wasn't really great with words. My mom was angry that the babysitter did that, but she let it slide as we were moving in a month, and she didn't know if we were being completely honest. The house we moved to is a house I spent a large majority of my childhood and teen years in. Things were normal once we transitioned into the new house, until we got the calls. We changed our phone numbers, so we weren't sure how the babysitter and her husband found it so quickly. She called every day, saying we needed to pay her and that we owed her money. She was just angry that we moved and we were currently on the lookout for a babysitter that was closer to home. My parents received these calls every day, and they consisted of the babysitter and her husband screaming, which meant I could hear the voicemails and calls quite clearly. They kept harassing us, and my parents grew agitated and worried. It all ended one night, around 10 p.m., when my sister and I woke up to the sound of banging on our front door. It continued for a good 10 minutes, and was very loud. My sister was freaked out, so I decided to see if my parents were awake. They were just opening their eyes, kind of confused as to what was going on. My dad told my mom to stay upstairs, and he foolishly went downstairs to get the door, as I stood at the railing nervously. My sister stayed in the bedroom because she was unaware of what was actually happening. When he opened the door, I felt sick and terrified. There was the babysitter and her husband, who managed to find not only our address, but also our phone number. The husband started screaming at the top of his lungs, yelling, "You owe us money! Pay us!" and shaking a knife. Yes, he had a knife in his hand. My dad told him that we didn't and warned him to leave unless he wanted the cops called. He didn't care. My dad went to close the door, but he stuck his foot in it, attempting to get inside. My babysitter was also yelling, but I couldn't hear what she said. We had a phone upstairs, so my mother quietly called the cops as my dad struggled to close the door. Once he did, the banging and screaming continued. They wouldn't leave our property. I was so freaked out, so I started crying. My sister saw me crying, and she did the same. Long story short, about an hour and the cops arrived, having just missed them. My parents knew their info based on the fact that they babysat us, so it wasn't too hard to track them down, and they were arrested. I always wondered if their children were home alone or at a sleepover, especially at a time so late. Regardless, they were released a few days later, but were not allowed to step foot near our house. I'm not sure if the woman still babysits, but if she does, I feel terrible for those kids. We never really knew what their intentions were that night. My dad saw the knife and knew they were up to no good. All I can say is, psychotic babysitter and her husband, let's not meet ever again. Some backstory. This happened when my grandparents were in their early to mid-20s. My grandma had worked in daycares and schools for a while. And while she quit when she had kids, she would kind of have an unofficial daycare/babysitting job at their house, taking care of some neighborhood kids whose parents worked during the day. Some new neighbors had just moved in down the street. A husband and wife. I think they had 2 kids. This being 60s suburbia, they invited my grandparents over for dinner one night. The wife was showing my grandmother around the house a bit, and it turned out that they ran a daycare center in their house. She showed my grandma the room that they did it in. My grandmother had some trouble connecting with this woman, so of course she mentioned that she also ran a daycare at home. The woman immediately got angry at her, asking if she had an official license, etc. Well, she didn't, and she explained to the woman that it really wasn't a daycare, just her babysitting for some neighborhood kids at her house. They were just calling it one. This seemed to calm the woman down, and they were able to have a normal dinner. Although the husband and wife kept recommending that my grandma send the neighborhood kids as well as my mom and uncle over to their house, an accredited daycare center, during the day instead of my grandma taking care of them. Well, the dinner went fine, and my grandparents left, a little creeped out, but whatever. A few years later, my grandma was reading the paper and saw that the husband had been arrested for molesting children, his own as well, and the ones that were supposedly safe in their accredited home daycare. To this day, my grandma thinks that the reason why the woman was so defensive is because she knew something was going on with her husband. This happened about 10 years ago when I was living in a not-so-great neighborhood, in a not-so-great 1920s style house. The house, despite being pretty run down, had a really neat design. It had a huge front porch that was screened in and large picture windows on all sides. The front of the house faced the main road through a pretty rough neighborhood, which meant some interesting scenes went down right outside our front door, such as high-speed police chases. During that year or so that we lived on that street, there was a homeless man that would walk down the sidewalk in front of our house. He was almost 6 feet tall, with a head full of dreadlocks, and wore a large trench coat, even though we were in Florida. He would slowly pass the front of our house every few days, dragging a large plastic outdoor trash can, usually muttering something to himself. He never really bothered me or made me uneasy, as I have a soft spot in my heart for the homeless. I was off work one day, home alone, waiting for my boyfriend to get home. It was still early in the evening and daylight outside, so I had the blinds up and some of the windows open. I was on the computer in the living room when I heard the man outside dragging the trash can, talking to himself. By this time we were so familiar with the sounds of the man that I didn't even go to the window to look. It goes away from my mind and an hour passes by, when I randomly noticed that I never actually heard him pass our house. As I mentioned, I became very familiar with the sounds of him walking past our house, so when I realized I hadn't heard him go from one side to the other, I got goosebumps all over my entire body. Because of my severe anxiety, I basically froze in the chair at this point. I know that the front blinds are always closed because we usually have a bong on the table, so I cannot tell if there's anyone in the front yard without getting up out of my seat. I slowly stand up and approach the door, look through the peephole, and to my horror, the man was staring right back at me. He had been standing there staring for an hour. I know that because as soon as he noticed my shadow obscure the peephole, he started pounding the door, pulling at the handle, and screaming nonsense at me. I completely panicked. I had no idea what this man was capable of. But as a survivor of sexual assault, I tend to immediately fear the worst. As he continued to pound on the door and yell, I ran to the bedroom and got our gun. Back in the living room, gun loaded, pointing at the door, I scream at him to go away. He continues without a pause, as if he didn't hear me. I repeat myself and add that I have a gun. Literally no change. Finally, I screamed that the gun is loaded. I was terrified, and I would shoot through the door if he did not leave. After this, silence. I was too scared to check the peephole after our face-to-face encounter, so I called 911 and begged them to hurry. They caught up to the guy at the end of the road and drove me down to identify him. The cops were complete jerks. Apparently they knew this guy, and he was a regular trespasser at local businesses. I explained the story in detail to the police officers. I was visibly shaken up and crying. I explained that I almost shot the man and probably would have killed him. They tell me he's harmless and I'm overreacting. Maybe I was overreacting, but I'm not sorry. Would I have been absolutely heartbroken if I hurt this man, who was obviously not in the right mind? 100%. Would I have regretted not acting this way if he had gotten through my door? Most likely. Either way, let's not meet again, trash can guy. I was maybe around 13 or 14 years old at the time, and I was recently granted the privilege of staying home alone. Every now and then when I was home alone, I'd hear sounds coming from upstairs, so I would instinctively call my mom. She then told me she used to hear things in her old house all the time, and how it's just the house settling in. Fast forward to many instances of the sound later. I decided the very next time I was going to be home alone, I was going to be completely silent and make as little noise as possible. Within the first half an hour, there was nothing, not a peep out of the entire house. I eventually got bored and felt safe, so I went to go grab the TV remote to watch some TV. But a few seconds before I grabbed the remote, I heard a loud crash upstairs and running footsteps. I was sure more than ever that someone was in the house. By now there were plenty of consistent sounds coming from upstairs, that it was a fact that someone was upstairs. 14-year-old me decided to hatch a quick plan. Being the skinny, most non-threatening little girl I was, I first grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Then I grabbed a shoe and propped the front door open. After a few moments and some deep breaths, I yelled out in the deepest voice I could, "I know you're upstairs. I am giving you a chance to leave without me calling the police, but I have propped the front door open and I'll be in the bathroom. Be aware that I am holding a knife, and if you refuse to leave, I will call the police." Sure enough, I walked into the bathroom with a knife, absolutely scared to death that someone will open the door. I wait and wait until the one sound to this day that will always scare me for this reason. I heard the front door close and the shoe was moved. I quickly locked the door and turned the alarm system on. I hope to never see this person or hear this person again. This happened a few years back. I was about 14 years old and my parents were out, and had left me with my little sister, who was 10 at the time, home alone. It was about 10 or 11 p.m. when the lights go out. This used to happen sometimes in my country, since it's a new country and is really poor. But that time I noticed something was out of the ordinary. Only the lights in our house were out, and our neighbors' lights were on. I had a bad feeling, so I quickly locked the doors and closed the blinds. I told my little sister to hide behind the couch and not to get out, no matter what happened. I hid somewhere else with a knife, tried to call my mom, but she didn't pick up, so I waited. I thought it was over, so I got out of my hiding place and headed to the kitchen, where we had a back door to look out the window. Before I get close, I hear the doorknob turning. It doesn't work, so the person on the other side tries again, now violently. This is where I panic and shout it out. "Who the fuck are you? Fuck off my house. I have called the police." I hear footsteps and then nothing. I went to the other room and looked out the window, and I saw someone running out of my backyard. My sister was crying, so I comforted her. We still stayed hidden until my parents came home about an hour after. We told them everything, and my dad said whoever it was, he had initially cut the house electricity to scare us. To this day, every time the electricity goes out, I kind of get scared, and I'm glad we're okay. When I was 14, I would spend the summer holidays away from school at home. I lived in a small village and spent most of the days on my own, watching TV and playing Sims while my parents worked. My parents were generally out of the house from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. I was raised to never answer the door to strangers. However, where I liked to sit in the living room, the chair was located right next to the window anyway, so I could always see people on the street, and they could see me too. One day I sat watching daytime TV when I noticed a man walking down our street. Our street is a dead end, so I normally recognize everyone who walks down, but I certainly have never seen this man before. He was tall, thin, and unshaven. He was wearing a hooded jumper with the hood up and the sleeves rolled up, revealing tattoos on his arms, carrying a large duffel bag and looking closely at each house as he passed. As I sat watching him, I was in full view of him too. He started to pass our house, and when he saw me, he smiled and turned to come up our short driveway. He came up to our front door and knocked. I knew I shouldn't answer the door to someone I didn't know, but he had seen me, and I'm 14, and was afraid to be rude to an adult, so I obediently went to open the door, just a crack. I peeked around the door and said hello. As he spoke, he pulled the duffel bag around his body, asked me if my parents were home. At this point, I thought he'd probably leave if I said no, but instead he stepped towards the door and unzipped the bag. "Well, the thing is, I just got out of prison, and I wanted to do the right thing, you know. It's hard to find a job, so I'm trying to sell some things." He started pulling towels, handkerchiefs, and other junk out of his bag. The word prison made my heart sink, and I quickly mumbled something about having no money and closed the door. He stood on the step for a minute, still talking to me about being able to help. So I went upstairs and waited for him to leave, which he did. I soon settled back down watching TV and forgot all about the encounter. At 5 p.m. my parents came home and took the TV, so I went up to my room. A little while later there was a knock at the door. I came onto the landing and peered down as my mom answered. 2 police officers stood on the step. They asked if anyone had came to our house that day. My mom said no one had, and that was when I remembered my visitor from earlier. I came downstairs and said actually someone had came by. Seeing that I was young, the 2 police officers asked to come inside and talk to me. They asked me to describe the man and the conversation I had with him. They seemed really worried and kept telling me not to worry and to be honest about what happened. Once I had told them what happened, they asked to speak to my parents on their own, and they thanked me and left. I asked my parents what was going on. My mom explained to me that a few minutes after the guy came to our house, he had gone to another girl's house. She was in the shower and hadn't answered the door when he knocked. Apparently, he let himself into the house and walked upstairs. When he found her in the shower, he sexually assaulted her. With my description and the evidence from the girl, they tracked the guy down. It turned out that he had just been released from prison on a similar attack on another girl. I never answer the door when I'm alone now, and I also won't shower when I'm home alone. This story comes from my father, born near Toronto, who grew up on a farm with his younger brother and his older sister. So this happened in 1969, while my dad was 8 or 9. One night, both parents were out of the house, along with his brother. They left him and his sister home alone. Eventually the phone rings and my father picks up, with a standard Canadian politeness. "Hello, this is Bob." The person calling said they were coming to kill both my father and his sister, and told them to leave the house. My father, slightly spooked, uses the intercom system to page his sister, telling her what happened. At this time, both children could drive, as they'd been doing so on the farm, so leaving the house wasn't too much of a problem. While packing up some things to leave, the phone rings again, and my father answers it. "Hello, this is Bob." The voice says, "Why haven't you left yet? I'm coming to kill you." With which my father replies, "Well, I'm trying to leave, but you keep fucking calling. I can't leave when I have to keep on answering the phone now, can I?" The voice hangs up and my father and sister drive to where their parents are having dinner. Nothing else happened with that voice. It was probably just a prank of some sort, and it didn't really faze my dad. But I thought you guys would enjoy this tale from Canada. So I'm a pizza delivery girl. I was at work around 9:30 p.m. when this guy calls. Very whispery, breathy voice. I do my usual greeting. "Thank you for calling Pizza Hut. This is... How are you doing tonight?" After the usual exchange, I find out he's ordering for delivery. He is a new customer, so I had to put in all his information for delivery. Nothing weird. He tells me he has a coupon for pizza and asks me if I can give him a discount. I told him, "Let me grab my manager and we'll take care of that for you." He asked for me to specifically take care of him. After I came back from dealing with my boss, I told him that we discounted him for his coupon. He thanked me, and here's where everything gets weird. He stopped me mid-sentence and told me that I have a very nice sounding tone of voice, and that he loved hearing me talk, and that I should be a disc jockey. I was a little weirded out, but I tried to stay professional. I told him that was very sweet and I would consider it. He said, "I'd listen to your radio station. Thank you for taking my order tonight. I'll stop by the store and see you sometime soon." I wish I could say it was over, but that isn't true. Not 5 minutes later, the man calls back, and my co-worker answers the phone. I learned after the fact that he had asked for me by name. I picked up the phone and did my greeting again. And he reminded me I forgot to ask for his apartment number. Nothing weird yet. Again, I thanked him and changed the information. Before I could hang up, this was our conversation. Him, "Are you doing alright?" Creepy laugh. "Yes, sir, I'm great." "Good. I'm going to hang up now. See you soon." My coworker heard the whole story and told my boss to have a male coworker take it. This is the story he came back with after delivering the pizza. Okay, so I got there right, and I knock on the door. He said in a weird, seductive voice, "Come in." But I was not about to go into this guy's house, so I knocked again. He opened the door with a big smile on his face, but saw it was me, and it just dropped. I greeted him and he said, "Where's the girl from the phone?" I told him that you were here at the store, and he just looked upset. After I took his money and gave him his food, he asked me how you were. I told him you were doing alright, and he just said, "Good, she is a sweet girl. Tell her I'll see her soon." The fact that he asked the driver to come in, and he was expecting me, creeps me out. Maybe he's just lonely and wants someone to talk to, but still, add one more creep to my list. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forests, some great state parks, and tons of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is relatively poor. While there are some out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places, a lot of the people where I live are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I can do most of it online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of those small towns that will rob you from your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay here too long, without anything else going for you, at least. Excluding a handful of doctors and lawyers and Georgia Power Company employees, the only other employment in the area is Walmart, fast food, and a couple of grocery stores. To the east of my town, there's a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and a lot of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog. It's about a 10-minute drive from town, and there's no cell phone service or homes for miles. In the past, there have been a lot of vehicle break-ins at the trailheads. The gravel parking lots at some of them glitter with bits of broken glass from what I'm guessing were car windows. Sometimes there are really shifty people hanging around these trailheads or just driving around the Forest Service roads. These are really rough roads, and you'll see these beat up $500 cars just barreling along the roads meant for 4x4s. Some of the people you see in these cars look like the guy that got crushed by the ATM in Breaking Bad. All that being said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you just have to be careful. A few years ago, 2 of my friends and I decided to play paintball in the National Forest. Probably illegal, I know. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip so we could play the next morning too. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drove a couple of miles to one of the more popular camping spots. Unfortunately, a church group or something had taken up all the spots in the area. This was really the only camping spot that we were familiar with, and it was getting pretty late. We decided to keep looking, so we drove about an hour further and further into the woods. By this time, it was getting pretty dark, and we were getting a bit worried about finding a spot. We had all our GPS and smartphones on us, but none of us had service. We turned off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in very good shape. In fact, it looks like the Forest Service rangers used a backhoe to block off this road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier laid in the woods nearby. It looked like 4x4 vehicles had been going over this mound, so it was pretty worn down. Our F-150 had a pretty high clearance, so we decided to go over the mound. There was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove a few miles down the road and came across an opening next to a small creek. There were some blue tarps hanging over a plywood table nailed to a tree, which seemed kinda odd. That said, it was pretty much dark at this point, and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck running and set up the tent. As we were setting up the tent, I started to notice that there was a lot of trash in the woods surrounding this site. I see a green bottle laying on the ground. I take a look at the label and see that it's a bottle of Home and Garden insecticide. I was really tired at this time, and I just thought that someone had been dumping their garbage out here. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage in this area that is more than an hour from the nearest home. We set up camp, had some beers, and made chili from scratch. By this time, it was probably around 11 p.m., and we were eating, and we noticed a faint glow from the other side of the nearby hill. At first we thought it was the moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles didn't make much sense. It didn't seem to be a bright light, and it wasn't moving. It was kind of like that glow you see over a bright city. Since there was no other access roads in the area, we decided it wasn't other campers. The hill was a quarter mile from our campsite, so we decided to investigate. Under normal circumstances, I know we wouldn't have done so. However, we all had a few rum and cokes in our stomachs, and 2 of us, Jacob and I, decided to take a look. My other friend Isaac decides to stay and pop some popcorn over the fire. We start walking towards the light source, and the situation gets even stranger. All the trees in the area have bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. We thought it could have been a work of a beaver that lived in the creek, but it seemed strange that a beaver would go around all these trees and just knock off bark in a circle. Jacob and I start talking about a ghost beaver in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. As we're almost to the top of the hill, Jacob tripped and yelled, "Oh shit!" A few seconds after he yelled, the light, whatever it was, went out. We looked at each other and decided maybe we didn't need to see where the light was coming from. We walked back in silence and kept looking back every few seconds. We decided to turn off our flashlights and just use the moonlight to get back to our campsite. When we get a couple 100 feet from our campsite, I could see my other friend Isaac walking around the campsite. He was wearing a hooded coat that I hadn't seen him wear before. For some reason, he was carrying a paintball gun around in his hand. That seemed a little odd, we said to each other. The fire had started to die down, so we couldn't see the campsite very well at all. At this point, we probably had been gone for almost an hour. From the distance, it looked like Isaac was looking for something. He kept walking around the site and peering into the tent. When we were almost back to the campsite, we saw Isaac walk up the road we came in on. We figured he was going to use the bathroom and didn't want to wander into the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to the fire and waited for Isaac to come back. All of a sudden, we see him lurch out of the tent. He stumbles a few feet and vomits. After we left, he had a few more rum and cokes. He mumbles. We asked him why he kept wandering around the campsite with a paintball gun, and he gets a strange look on his face. They're locked up in the cab of the truck. We go to check the truck, enter the door code, and see our paintball equipment just where we left it before. The keys to the truck were still hidden in the magnetic fob underneath. I get a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Isaac, what were you doing after we left? I asked. I was watching a movie on my phone. Then I fell asleep, I guess. But you were walking around with your paintball gun, right? Just change your jackets? Isaac said he had been in a tent since we left, that he had been wearing the same unhooded fleece all night. Someone was walking around our campsite, and it wasn't Isaac. At this point, all of us were too drunk to drive, but we decided to go ahead and pack up and go back to the house for the night. We didn't bother packing up the tent. We just folded it down with the sleeping bags and everything in it. We jump into the F-150 and start to drive out. When we get back to the dirt hump, we see something gray blocking our path. The metal barrier that was laying in the woods earlier is now back on its stand, right on top of the hump. By this point, all of us had sobered up to the situation. No one wants to go out of the car and move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of my F-150, so I drove forward slowly, tapping the metal barrier with the front of my truck. It falls right off. It must have just been balanced on top, and we drove over it slowly. We were terrified that it would pop one of the truck's tires as we drove over it, but it didn't. As soon as we drove down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it as the moon reflects light off of it. I start to drive as fast as I can on the Forest Service road, and the other vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It just stays 1 or 2 turns behind us. We can only see it when the road straightens out. After about 45 minutes of speeding along gravel roads, we make it back to the main paved road. I start to drive everyone back to my house, but I decided to go a different way just to be safe. I didn't get pulled over for a DUI, luckily. Camping can be fun, but very rural camping can be dangerous. I've driven past the metal barrier since that time, but it always seems to be in place. I would never go down that road again though. I told him we were closed and he had to leave. The man ended up saying he wanted the money out of the safe. He also pulled out a pistol to make sure I did what he said. The safe for the Pizza Hut was locked in the back of the store, so the dude walked behind the counter and followed me back there. Now usually when the safe gets open, it makes a loud alarm sound. Not sure why, but the man didn't know that. So when I went to open the safe, the little alarm sound went off and he thought I alerted the cops. He ended up pistol whipping me and then taking off. I ended up going to the hospital to get checked out and described what the guy looked like to the cops. And to the best of my knowledge, they never caught the guy. This story is going to be a bit long. A couple months ago, I walked up to a Pizza Hut just a few minutes away from my house to grab some cheap food on an uneventful Saturday night. When I got there, I ordered my pizza and sat down to wait for it. As I was flipping through text on my phone, an older woman, probably in her mid to late 50s, walked in and ordered a pizza. After she did, she sat down next to me, smelling of somewhat alcohol, and began to cry looking over at me. Then she began slamming her phone on the table in front of us and started asking me, "Why is my life shit?" over and over. She kept talking to herself, saying, "I can't believe I left my fucking wallet in the pub," in between wails. A few minutes after, a young father and his daughter around 4 years old walked in, and they ordered pizza as well. His daughter was speaking to what I assume was their native tongue, and she was doing a typical little kid thing, making cutesy noises while doing so. Apparently, this woman couldn't handle it and yelled, "Tell your little kid to shut the fuck up, or I'll make her shut up. He promptly left, and she started saying, I'm getting pizza for my kids, and my kids have died, over and over. 2 guys come in afterwards, a teenager and a middle-aged dude with a scooter. The teenager went to grab his order, which he told the scooter guy was for his brother's birthday party. The woman continued wailing, and he and I exchanged glances as he looked at her and made a confused expression towards me, and I just shrugged. He then left, and it was just me and her and scooter guy. Suddenly, she starts complaining to scooter guy, who said, would you like to come on a ride with me on my scooter? I can make you forget all your troubles. I had figured the whole ordeal might be over at this point, but nah, she rejected it. Anywho, my pizza was taking 15 minutes longer than usual due to the party teen guy, so I just waited there in awkward silence while she tried to make conversation with me by telling me that she wants to kill herself. When I finally got my pizza, I left and noticed she was following me. So I ran behind a building into a dark alleyway to get her off my trail because, as I said, I only live a couple minutes away. All in all, probably one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had in my life. I just wanted to eat pizza and watch TV. Once upon a time, long, long ago, I worked at a pizzeria, Papa Murphy's to be exact. One night, when I was 16, I was closing with my 15-year-old coworker, who we will call Lee. About 15 minutes before closing, someone called in an order, and we made the pizza. Then comes closing time, and no one came in to pick it up. So we stored it, and locked the doors, turned off the open sign and lights. 5 minutes after close, a lady comes up to the door and starts pounding on it. We didn't open it because we were closed, and we aren't legally obligated to open the door after we're closed. A few minutes later, my phone rings and I pick it up with a typical, hello, Papa Murphy's, we're currently closed. And on the other side, an angry lady yells, 20 minutes ago I called in and I came to get it, but your doors are locked and I can see you right now. I'm never giving my money to this establishment ever again. Blah, blah, blah. And she hung up on me and pulled out of the parking lot. Cool. Whatever, bitch. Lee stays in the front to clean and I go in the back to the kitchen. 5 to 10 minutes later, Lee comes around back to the kitchen and says, the lady is back. I was like, bitch, what? I go into the front and see the lady in the white sedan is most definitely back. I was like, maybe it's someone else who has a similar car. And Lee goes, no, it's the same one. I memorized the license plate. What the hell is she doing back? But I was tired and I wanted to leave. So I told Lee to continue cleaning and not to worry about it. Fast forward 20 minutes later and the stupid car is still there. What in the world is this bitch doing? Why is she still here? Lee and I were a bit shook, but we called our managers and explained the situation. They said just to make sure all the doors were locked and to leave together. We agreed and finished up cleaning. After a while, my manager decides to pay a visit and check out the store and stuff. By now, it was nearly an hour after closing time, and we were supposed to leave nearly half an hour after close. But we were too scared to because her car was out there. So my manager told us they'll scope out the car, and that there was nobody in there. It was strange as hell. Me and Lee were pretty fucking shook, but we were just like, whatever, let's get the hell out of here. And so we did. When I walked out to my ride, I glanced at the car, and it was true. No one was in there. On the ride home, I'm contemplating the situation because it's just so bizarre. But then I realized that in the little outlet mall where we were located, every store around us had closed hours ago. We were always last to leave. So where the hell did this lady go? There was no other store that she could have gone in. She parked directly in front of the store, in the spot closest to the door, but she wasn't in the car. She left after she got mad, then came back, and now she was gone. Maybe my managers found out, but I bounced because I really was not trying to get shot or assaulted or worse, because a bitch didn't get her pizza. From now on, I'm always wary of salty customers. Let's not meet salty pizza lady. My friends and I decided to go camping one spring. We had planned a week in advance, and as the day got closer, the weather got worse. It was cold and gray, unheard of for Arkansas. The night finally came along with yet another cold front. It was in the 30s, but we had dressed warm and stocked up on whiskey and beer. The plan was to hit the spot my buddy knew, which was barely accessible with his 4x4. We wanted to really camp, none of those designated sites for families and seniors in RVs, so we aimed away from civilization, which was only made up by a single stoplight and a couple hundred people, and we drove into the woods. After 30 minutes of bone-rattling dips across the dry creek beds and detours around trees, it started to rain. By the time we found camp, it had turned into hail. The spot was marked by an ancient dirt road a few hundred feet along a rotting carcass of a VW bug. The night was spent passing the bottle around, hoping we would figure out our tents before we got too drunk. Eventually we did, and managed to start a fire with diesel. At this point the hail stopped. The empty whiskey bottle lay broken in the fire, and we had a decent pile of empties going. We drank, we played cards, we passed out in our tents. The next morning I gradually regained consciousness to the sound of something large being dragged past my tent. It was what looked to have been a station wagon, stripped and rust covered, dragging the VW with a chain. The VW had been there for so long that the floor had rotted out and roots tied it to the forest floor. They laid scatter in wake of the wagon. A woman was driving, a man beside her, and 3 shirtless kids sat in the back where there used to be seats. The man stared out the window, away from us the entire time. The children had dirt smeared on their face, which illuminated their glassy 1,000-yard stares. It's a look of crushing poverty, and you've probably only seen it in pictures. It exists in war-torn countries, the projects in inner cities, and the deep south. So deep that the old gas stations back in town, a place you'd probably jokingly hum the Deliverance theme. That was the city to these people. She spoke in a deep nicotine and whiskey-soaked drawl. Y'all come to this city to do some camping? Well, reckon that's fine. Long as you ain't doing no drugs. You ain't doing drugs, are ya? We weren't. Just drinking then. Hell, I like a drink now and again. That's fine, just fine. Wanna know how I know you was here? Have you seen those black helicopters flying around? Them some boys that work for me, see? This is my land. And they told me. Can't be too careful. Figured I'd check it out. She started laughing, mucus bubbling up to wet her dry cackle. The man stared out at nothing. One of the children put both hands on the window and gazed through us. His mouth hung open, and spit cut the line through the filth on the glass. He probably was 10 years old. Y'all know Bethany? We didn't. Ha! Everyone knows old Beth. Y'all go to church? I lied. Good. Ain't no time for those who don't fear God. Why don't you come to church tomorrow? You can meet Bethany. It's just over the hill. She sure do like to meet y'all. They all would. We assured her we would. She drove away into the trees slowly, dragging the VW. As soon as she left, we looked over at each other and started laughing. It was just nerves. There wasn't anything funny about it. We all have remnants of primitive warning system for danger. It's been eroded by living safe and civilized, but every once in a while it goes off, and you obey it without a question. Something was wrong. It started before she spoke. When I looked into her eyes, something is wrong. The kids, the man, her laugh, something is wrong. Eventually we hiked up the hill and could see for a mile. There was nothing, no buildings, no clearings, just forest. We cut the trip short, packed up, and left before noon. Right after I graduated high school, I went to our community college, where my best friend at the time and her boyfriend also attended, along with a lot of their friends who I became acquainted as well. Fast forward to Halloween of 2010. We took my best friend's little sister and brother out trick-or-treating, where her boyfriend ended up joining. We were towards the end of the route when one of their friends from the college ended up joining us, which I didn't think anything about at the time, other than he gave weird vibes, which should have been my first clue. After we were done trick-or-treating, we brought the kids home to go to bed, but my friends wanted to do something to keep the night going, you know? They decided on going downtown, but I declined, since I wasn't feeling well, which was true. But I was also the only one with a car. I didn't want to be the chauffeur and went home. A few hours later, I was reading a book and my phone lit up from a number I didn't recognize. It was the friend that joined us on the trick-or-treating. He explained that he got my number from my best friend's boyfriend and was just concerned that I didn't feel well and insisted on bringing me soup to feel better. Some sort of red flag went off in my head, and I didn't want this guy to know where I lived. So I said no, my mom was taking care of it, but thank you anyway. He got a little pushy, but eventually backed down and proceeded to send me many texts on how much fun we had when we were out and blah blah blah. I later found out he bailed going downtown too because he only wanted to go with me. He then added me on Facebook, went through all my pictures and liked them. Second red flag. Being the naive 18-year-old I was, I just thought maybe he was overly friendly and it is just a little weird, so I didn't avoid him or anything at school since we hung out with the same people. One day when we didn't have school, he texted me asking if I wanted to go to lunch. I should have said no, and I accepted, thinking I was getting a free meal out of the deal since he insisted on paying and it would be a quick visit. We met at the restaurant and sat down and talked and ate. It was super awkward, and then I stupidly mentioned I wanted to go to the mall and get some stuff. He insisted on driving me there and that his mom could move to the back seat. Wait, what? Apparently he drove his mom's minivan, brought her along with him, and left her in the car while we went on our date. I kept saying that she should come in and join us, and he got really weird about it and said she was napping and didn't mind waiting. At this point, I started getting very uncomfortable. Luckily, we were done with our food and I said I needed to leave, thanked him for the food, and got up to go. He kept saying he'll meet me at the mall, and I was put in what I felt was a weird position, and I'm not an assertive person, so I reluctantly said okay. We met at a store connected to the mall, and I mentioned how I was there to look for a new scarf and started browsing. He picked up the most expensive one he could find and bought it for me, and basically almost threatened me not to return it. It was then I wanted to be left alone, so I said thank you and I was going to go home now. He insisted on walking me to my car, which we parked on opposite ends of the mall, and his mom was still in the van. And I kept saying it was okay, I was fine. He was a big guy, and even simple walking caused him to break out in a sweat. But he wouldn't take no for an answer, so away we went. We passed by another store and took a peek inside. There was a pair of boots that I very quickly, in passing, mentioned they were cute, but I don't know if I would wear them. He bought them for me, and did the same somewhat threat not to return them because these were gifts, and you don't return gifts. Like, dude, then what are gift receipts for? At that point, I got a little firm and told him I wanted some time alone, so please don't walk me out to my car. He accepted and went on his merry way, clearly happy he made those purchases to show me he liked me. I got to my car and wait for probably 20 minutes. I knew what his van looked like at this point and kept my eye out for it in case he was going to follow me home, but didn't see anything. I actually ended up going back in the mall and returned the boots and scarf. In reality, I didn't want either of them, and I was way too uncomfortable accepting those gifts from a strange person. I didn't like owing people, and I had a feeling he was going to use the same sort of leverage to get something from me. I took the long way home to make sure I wasn't being followed, and told my mom what happened. She was concerned and thought he was strange as well, since he and I didn't really know each other, and it seemed like a weird act of desperation. I got a text from him a few hours later saying he hoped I liked the gifts. I responded saying that I returned them because I wasn't comfortable with it, and he lost it. My phone kept lighting up with tons of texts. This was before it was easy to block someone, and I didn't know how to. The good old flip phone. And he was livid that I did such a disrespectful thing. I should be thankful he got those things for me. So I got angry and told him I didn't ask for the gifts. He basically threatened me to keep them. And he didn't take no for an answer when I told him I didn't want them. So essentially, he was the one disrespecting me. He backed down a little bit then. I told him to stop texting me and leave me alone. I got a few more texts, but eventually he stopped. It was weird at school because I kind of avoided being around my friends when I knew he was there. I still hung out with some of them alone, like my best friend. But when I knew a friend gathering was going on, I wouldn't go. They understood. Now, this is where I got stupid. I am a very, very compassionate person, and 9 times out of 10, I feel horrible for when I was mean to someone. Even in this instance, I ended up texting the creeper one night apologizing for how rude I was, and he said he understood where I was coming from, and we had a normal conversation for a little bit until I fell asleep around 11 p.m. I know this because I woke up at 2 a.m., looked at my phone and saw the last text I sent him a little before 11 o'clock, stating I was tired. After I fell asleep, he sent me one text. Saw that I didn't respond, text again. Saw that I didn't respond, kept texting. We're talking on the verge of 30 to 40 texts here. Called me on the cell phone about 10 times. Called me from another number about 15 times because he thought I was ignoring him. Then sent one last threatening message. If you don't respond within a half hour, I'm calling the police. I happened to wake up at 2 a.m., which was an hour after he sent that text, and flipped the fuck out. Texting him that I fell asleep and he better have not called the police. You want to know why he called the police? Because he interpreted me saying that I was tired as I was tired of living. He thought I killed myself. Never mind that it was, basically bedtime when I was talking to him. So yes, me killing myself is the most logical route to take here. I ran into my mom's room, told her what happened, and she goes, "For crying out loud, they have better things to do with their time. They aren't coming to check on you." I got back into my room, which looked out to our driveway. Look out the window to see a cop car parked on the street and 2 flashlights walking up the drive. They knocked on the door. I opened it. I'm pretty sure the look on my face told everything. "You Sally?" "Yep." "You know why we're here?" "Yep." "So what happened?" "I fell asleep." The police understood and actually called the creep back and told him to leave me the hell alone. Just as I was texting him to leave me the hell alone. He had the gall to ask me for my address again, to come over and apologize to me, and that he loved me. I told him he doesn't even know me, and he had absolutely no reason to be in love with me. His reasoning was that's how he worked. He fell in love first, and then decided if it was the right person or not. Dude was loony. This put a big strain on my friendship at the college. His story was much more twisted and painted me as the bad guy, and I ended up making a lot of enemies, even my best friend, because he labeled me as a whore. There was another guy interested in me as well among those friends, but he was much more less assertive, and I didn't give him the time of day, and everyone believed him, even though at the time I was still a virgin. I had to drop out of school because the circle of friends were so big, and whenever the creep saw me, irrationally angry, and his friends had to physically hold him back, which was a lot of people because he was massive. I since cut contact with all of them and ended up going to a different school that I loved so much more, and I am in a much better place without them in my life. So creep from school, I hope I never have to see you again.